We are here today with Michael Arditi, a novelist and critic for the Sunday Express, for the regular feature that he's doing for Dante Channel. So, what are we going to see this season, Michael?
Well, it's a very eclectic mix. Christmas is coming, but I haven't actually chosen any pantomimes, partly because I haven't seen any. But there is going to be the first pantomime at the London Palladium for 30 years, which is an all-star Cinderella. But I'm going to take things that from a wide variety are one musical, one revival, a comedy, a modern historical play, and a great Chekhovian play which has been reimagined by Michael Frayn. But if I start with the contemporary political play, which is This House at the Garrick, this was a play that was done at the National Theatre originally about 3 years ago. It was a great success there, and it's now moved to the West End. And it's a story about the Labour government in the 1970s, when they had a minority in Parliament, and how they managed to keep afloat. There are names there that will be unfamiliar even to people like myself, who was young then. But it's the spirit of the thing that's caught, and particularly because it focuses on the whip's office. And it shows how the whips, who are the people who maintain discipline in the party political system in Britain, and how they actually make sure that the right people are voting at the right time for the government legislation or indeed the opposition motions, how they cajole people, how they threaten people, how they bribe people, and they behave really with an appalling iniquity, and that's how our laws are formed. It's very, very funny. Even if you don't know the personages involved, you can't actually help belly laughs at times. It's beautifully choreographed in a very imaginative production by Jeremy Herrin, and has some wonderful performances, largely men, as a group of very, very venal politicians.
The second one you suggested, The School of Rock.
Well, this is Andrew Lloyd Webber's new musical, and anybody who's read the theatre criticism I've written, well, off and on for the past 30 years, will know that I'm not the world's greatest fan of Andrew Lloyd Webber, but this is by far his best musical ever. It's based on the film that was a great success several years ago with Jack Black, and it's about a very incompetent musician who suddenly finds himself, well, inveigles himself actually, into a position as a temporary teacher at a children's school. He then effectively preaches anarchy, gets them to play a huge range of musical instruments extraordinarily well on stage by these young children, and a great time is had by all. I'm not sure that many of the parents who take the children to see this will be totally appreciative of the message, the underlying message of teenage rebellion. But the audience certainly loved it. And Lloyd Webber, in moving from his usual Puccini-based scores to something that's much more Led Zeppelin, actually sort of finds a joy, a humour, a sense of fun that has been absent from his work for so long. And the central performance by David Flynn, a rather large man who we're used to actors who sort of fight the flab, he flaunts it. He throws himself across the stage, he sings, he plays, and he charms the audience brilliantly.
Well, it sounds like we have to go and see it at any point.
Yeah.
What about Dead Funny at the Vaudeville?
Well, Dead Funny is exactly what its name implies. It is very, very funny. It's a revival of a comedy that was first seen at Hampstead Theatre, again, I can't remember exactly when, but about 15 years ago, by Terry Johnson, who's also well known as a director, and he directs it himself. And it's about a group of comedy aficionados who get together, I think once a week, to celebrate their dead comedy giants. And it so happens that this week in which they're doing it, Benny Hill, the popular English comedian, has just died. And a week later, Frankie Howerd, the almost more international figure, has also died. And it's framed by these two deaths of these two great comedy figures. And it's partly a loving recreation of their routines and a celebration of a certain sort of rather basic British humour. But there's also the figure of the host's wife, brilliantly played by Catherine Parkinson, who is very acerbic, and she disdains these antics, and she provides a constant sort of commentary on them. And so you have the double perspective, which is actually, by the end, very moving as well as very funny, because she's hoping for a child and there's a whole personal celebration.
Then you chose The Dresser, the Duke of York's.
Well, The Dresser is one of the most charming plays of the last 30 years. It became a famous film with Tom Courtenay and Albert Finney, and that's rather dominated our impression of the play. It's about an actor-manager, the old-style actor-managers who used to tour Britain, and in this case it's based very closely on Sir Donald Wolfett, whom the writer of the play, Ronald Harwood, was his dresser. Harwood always denies that it's an actual biographical portrait, and I'm sure it's not, but he can't have helped to have taken a great deal from the years he spent with them. It's a very loving portrait of a style of acting and a style of production that is now completely out of fashion, dominated by a great star actor, rather over-theatrical, and that's counterpointed all the time by the dresser of the title, who, you know, you're told the famous Carlyle saying, "No man is a hero to his valet." Well, this man is not a hero to his dresser, but he is much loved by him, and their relationship parallels King Lear and his fool, which is what is also being played out on stage. And it's given two wonderful performances by Ken Stott as Sir, the actor-manager. We've seen him in many, many great heavy roles, and he is perfect. But the revelation is Reece Shearsmith, who's best known as a TV comedian, who is terribly moving as well as very funny as the dresser himself.
So, last but not least, Wild Honey and the Hamster.
Yes, well, Wild Honey is based on Chekhov's Platonov. This was a play that was never performed in Chekhov's lifetime and was left in a very inchoate state. Apparently, if you played it as it's, you know, the manuscript, it would last 6 hours. And so every version, except perhaps some that are done by very avant-garde theatre directors in Germany or Russia, actually only takes a portion of the play, is a version. We saw one over the summer by David Hare at the National Theatre, which was very, very powerful, a rather more elegant, almost more conventional Chekhovian staging. This is adapted by the great playwright Michael Frayn, who's best known here for the farce Noises Off, which ran for years and years both in the West End and on Broadway. And he plays up the farcical elements that are definitely in the script. It's a portrait of a village schoolmaster who exerts great fascination for all the women in the district, with disastrous results. He is played beautifully by Geoffrey Streatfeild, and the production, which was going to be by the late Howard Davis, who died very sadly of cancer in the autumn, has been taken over by Jonathan Kent, who directed the Platonov I just mentioned at the National in the summer, and he's managed wonderfully with the very different tone of the Michael Frayn version. So that's a definite must for theatregoers.
Well, thank you for being with us, and I'm sure our audience will go and see your suggestion, and happy holidays.
Thank you very much.